Hey guys, this is MusicTechHelpGuy, and welcome to part 5 of my pop EDM production series in Logic Pro 10. If you'd like to work along with me, remember that this full multi-track session for this song is available for download. I'll make sure I put a link to it in the video description below. One minor thing I wanted to address before we get started was that I had someone go purchase the downloadable session, and they said that they couldn't get it to work with Logic 10.0. So if you're still working on 10.0, you may have some trouble opening it up, but there is actually a workaround for it. So if you run into that problem, just email me and I'll give you the steps for the workaround. But it should work just fine in Logic 10.1, 10.2, and 10.3. All right, so in the last video, we created a sort of like feedback delay transition in the vocals. And what we're going to do today is we're going to finish up some of our transitions and swells by reversing some audio clips and creating some cool sort of swelling in reversed effects. And we're going to do this to 3 different clips. So the very first thing we need to do before we do that is the intro verb aux track that we created that has all of the reverb for all of the software instruments, all the synths and instruments for the intro. It's just not bright enough. When I went back and listened to the reference mix, I want this to have a little bit more, obviously brightness to it, but just I want to enhance the high-end harmonics a bit more and make it a little bit more shimmery. And I also want to increase the tail of the reverb a bit. So instead of just going into Space Designer and trying to do it that way, let's drop down Space Designer. After the Space Designer plugin, we're going to add the Exciter plugin, and I'm going to pull the accentuation up by about 30%. There we go. So that's just going to enhance our overtone series above 2000 hertz, which is going to brighten it up quite a bit. And then one other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add delay before the Space Designer. This is just going to make it even more ambient. So I'm going to use the stereo delay plugin. I'm just going to keep the stock setting that we have here, quarter note and eighth note. I am going to cut out some of the high end and the delays and pull that up so there's not a whole lot of low end in it either. There we go. And then I'm going to pull the mix down quite a bit. I want to hear more of the dry signal than the wet signal. So that's that. And you may be asking, why not just go into Space Designer and increase the length of the decay time for the volume envelope? Well, a lot of Space Designer's reverbs are based on impulse responses, so actual wave files that are basically represent sounds or represent ambience in a room. There's actually a way you can create your own reverbs within Space Designer, but that will probably be a topic for another day. The maximum length that this impulse response can be is 5.1 seconds, and the only way to increase it would be to drop the sample rate, but that also makes the reverb darker, and I actually want it to be brighter and more shimmery. So that's why we're going this route. So let's listen to. Go ahead. I'm going to mute the vocals and the vocal transition for now, and let's just listen to the instruments with our new intro verb. All right, so now that we've got our reverb sounding the way we want it, it's a lot more shimmery, let's create a reversed piano chord to use in the intro as well as the swell end to the verse. So what we're going to do is on the Bosendorfer piano track, we're going to click on that, and we're going to duplicate it. So we're going to click right here. It'll duplicate that track in all of its settings. Then the chord that we're going to reverse is the very last chord of the main chord idea for the piano at the beginning. So I'm just going to drag over this using bar mode, bar snap, and then using the marquee tool, and just going to hold Option and then drag down. It'll make a duplicate of that chord. Now, I don't want this chord to just be 1 measure long. I actually want it to be 4 measures long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold Option and hover over the bottom right corner of the clip. And what it will do is it will extend not only the clip itself, but it will also extend the MIDI notes within the clip, so we don't have to actually use the piano roll for anything here. Then what we're going to do is we are going to directly place a copy of the reverb that's on bus 1, all the reverb settings, directly on this track and make it very, very ambient. And then we're going to convert it to audio and reverse it. So let me just solo this out, set my locators, open up the mixer here. We no longer need this bus on this one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull a copy of the stereo delay, space designer, and exciter over to our second Bosendorfer piano track. So you just hold Option and drag the plugin over, and it makes a duplicate. So we're going to do that for all 3 of these. So let's see what that sounds like now with all those effects on there. Yeah, it's a bit loud. It's a bit bright, so let's pull down the exciter. Keep in mind that we've got basically all wet signal here, so let's pull the reverb down, pull the dry signal up a bit. Let's do the same thing for actually the delay was fine. Let's give that a listen. There we go. So now what we're going to do is we are going to convert this clip to an audio track. First, I'm going to take the volume on that track and Option click on it to set it to unity. And then what you can do is you right click on it and you go down to bounce and join, and you go to bounce in place, or you can hit Control B. And what this will do is it'll convert this MIDI clip to audio. So I'm just going to call this reversed piano. We're going to put it on a new track. We're going to delete the source, and we are not going to bypass the effects plugins. We're going to include the audio tail and include volume and pan automation. Actually, this last one doesn't really matter, but I'm just going to keep it on anyway. Normalization will be off, so I'm going to hit OK. And what it'll do is create this new audio track down here with all that MIDI data and effects converted to audio. So we can delete our copy of the Bosendorfer track now. Notice that it's also longer because the tail end of the reverb was also included in the bounce. There you go. Pull the volume down a touch. Now, in old versions of Logic, in order to flip this around and reverse it, you'd actually have to double click and then go to like the file editor and then come in here and use the reverse function. There's actually a new function that was in, I can't remember which update it was. It might have been 10.1 or 10.2, but you can now click on any audio file or audio clip, go over to the region inspector over here, and then go down to more if it's not already open, and then click on reverse right here, and it'll actually reverse that audio clip. So now we have this. So in the original song, the piano fade-in was roughly about 3 bars long. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to fade this in by 3 measures. So for now, I'm going to turn off bar mode. I'm going to trim this up, and I'm going to try to put sort of like the front end of this, what's the back end now, right on measure 5 where the song kicks in. I'm going to cut off some of the front end. Put a fade on there. By the way, fade, if you're using the pointer tool, is Shift Control and drag over it. And then we will trim this to the left. I'll go back and grab and turn on bar mode again. We'll trim this up with the marquee tool, and I'll put another little fade on it, and let's see what that sounds like now. There we go. Now, there's also a copy of this right over here, right as we go into the verse that's underneath that filtered transition we created in the last video. So I'm going to make sure my bar mode is on, and I'm going to make sure that snap regions to relative value is on. And we're going to hold Option and drag this over. I guess you didn't have to use the relative function. And this one, I'm actually going to make this a little bit longer here. I'm going to pull it all the way out. And let's see what that sounds like now. It's not exactly like the original. There's still some things that we need to do to on bus processing, all these instruments to make it sound a little bit more like the original, but for now, the idea is there. I'm also going to actually pull down the reverb amount on the piano here. It just sounds like we've got just a touch too much reverb now. And let's listen to that whole intro. Actually, we'll just listen to it from the vocals on, because there's one more thing we need to add to all this.
Fearless, tell me I'm your weakness. You got it bad. You got it bad, so bad, so bad. You got me go.
All right. So that helps just build this swell in, sort of build up a little bit more strongly than it did before. So there's one more thing we're going to add to all this, and that's these crash samples down here. The crash samples are, let me just unmute them. So if you see a clip, a region that's actually grayed out like this, but the track itself is not muted, that just means that the clip or the region itself is muted. And the way you can unmute those is drag over them and hit Control-M, and it'll unmute them. So these are just two crash cymbals. They're very simple. What we're going to do is do something very, very, very standard. And we are going to reverse these cymbal swells so that they become sort of like, again, a swell or a transition into the first verse. So just like we did before, we can drag over these, go over to our region inspector over here, click on reverse. It reverses those, and they now sound like this. There we go. So another thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to pan these left and right. So this one will be all the way to the left. This one will be all the way to the right. We could turn this right click and turn on the stereo pan. It's one of those new options in 10.3. And let's go ahead and do that. We'll just maybe just do something like this with a little bit more overlap. Let's see what that sounds like.
You got me.
Okay, so there's two things that I want to add to both of these reversed cymbals as well. I want to add, I want to filter out some of the low end with an EQ, and I also want to add some reverb to them. And rather than putting EQ and reverb on each channel, we're actually going to group them together and sort of treat them as one idea or one instrument. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to drag over both of these in the mixer, go to their outputs, stereo output here, and we're going to change that to one of our available buses. So I'm going to use bus 4 since we haven't used that yet. And again, this is the actual output, not the send this time. So it's going to create an aux track, aux 4, and I'm just going to call this cymbals. And it'll automatically create a bus assignment for it. If it's not in stereo, make sure you change it to stereo. So we're going to throw the channel EQ up here. And with the channel EQ, we're just going to scoop out a lot of the low end. And then we're going to add a reverb with Space Designer. And this is under large spaces, plate reverbs, and it's called sustain plate. We're going to use that. Pull the dry down a little bit, pull the reverb up quite a bit. Maybe, yeah, that's fine. And let's see what that sounds like just by itself. Just those crash cymbals. By the way, if you've got a bunch of tracks that are all zoomed to different levels, if you hold Shift and click on like the boundary between them, it'll set them all to the same size, and then you can come up here and vertically zoom them. Let's listen to just the crash samples though. There we go. And there we go. So let's listen to the whole thing now, just the intro, with our new transitions in here, with our new swells, and let's see what we've got.
Tell me how you love me. Tell me that you need me. Tell me that I'm everything you want me to be. Tell me how I'm fearless. Tell me I'm your weakness. You got it bad. You got it bad, so bad, so bad. got me going.
Cool, so we're getting closer and closer. There's also, in my mix, I did some volume automation on all these synth tracks just to sort of start them a little quieter and build them up. We're going to worry about that later once we get all the levels where we actually want them. Then we'll start writing in volume automation. Okay, so we're getting pretty close. In the next video, what we'll do is there was one little echo up here. It was almost sounded like an auto-tuned filtered echo that was a manually created echo. We'll do that, and then we'll wrap up a few more things with the intro, and then we can finally move on to the verse and tuning and aligning the vocals in the verses. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.